My Ring camera sent me a motion alert at 2 a.m., and my heart pounded, expecting to see a stranger on my porch. But it was just my husband, and as I turned up the volume, I realized the real danger wasn't outside my house, it had been living inside it for 7 years. The grainy, night vision green of the camera feed felt alien, even though it was pointed at the familiar welcome mat I'd picked out, the one that said it's good to be home. Right now, home felt a million miles away. I was 30 miles across town at my parents' house, surrounded by the comforting floral wallpaper of my childhood bedroom. My folks were on a 2-week cruise, their first real vacation since Dad retired, and I'd happily volunteered to look after their geriatric golden retriever, Buster, and water the small jungle of houseplants my mom called her babies. It was a welcome break, in a way. Life with Tom, my husband of 7 years, had settled into a rhythm so quiet it sometimes felt silent. We were comfortable, stable. That's the word everyone used for us. Jenna and Tom are so stable. We had a nice house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, 2 reliable cars, and jobs that paid the bills with a little left over. We didn't fight. We didn't have passionate, movie-style make-out sessions in the kitchen, either. We just were. A unit. A partnership that hummed along on low power, efficient and predictable. I loved him, of course. He was a good man, kind and steady. He worked hard as a project manager, remembered my favorite takeout order, and always let me watch my trashy reality shows without complaint. If I ever felt a tiny, gnawing ache for something more excitement, more spontaneity, more of the deep, soul-bearing conversations we used to have when we were first dating, I'd push it down. This was what marriage was, I told myself. A quiet companionship. A safe harbor. My younger sister, Chloe, didn't see it that way. At 26, 3 years my junior, she was everything I wasn't, a whirlwind of bright colors, loud laughter, and impulsive decisions. She was a freelance graphic designer, and her life was a chaotic, beautiful collage of last-minute trips, late-night art projects, and a string of boyfriends who all seemed to play guitar and own at least one motorcycle. She was my best friend, my confidante. We spoke on the phone nearly every day, our conversations a lifeline of shared jokes and sisterly advice. You and Tom need to shake things up, she'd declared over brunch just last week, gesturing emphatically with a mimosa. Go on a trip. Take a dance class. Do something that reminds you you're alive, not just roommates. I'd laughed it off, telling her that not everyone needed to live life at 100 miles an hour. We're happy, I'd insisted, maybe a little too forcefully. Quiet is good for us. Now, watching my good and quiet husband on my phone screen, I felt a prickle of unease. He wasn't supposed to be home. He'd told me he was staying at his brother's place for a couple of nights since it was closer to the hospice where his mother was. Her cancer had taken a sharp turn for the worse, and the doctors had given her days, maybe a week. Tom was wrecked, understandably so. He'd been quiet and withdrawn for weeks, his grief a heavy blanket smothering the already low flame of our interactions. I'd tried to be there for him, making his favorite meals, rubbing his shoulders, telling him to take all the time he needed. He'd just nod, his eyes distant, and say, "Thanks, Jen." So what was he doing on our porch at 2 in the morning? The motion alert had jolted me from a fitful sleep. My first thought, naturally, was a prowler. I imagined someone testing the doorknob, peering into our windows. But the figure on the screen was undeniably Tom. He was pacing back and forth on the small porch, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked agitated, his shoulders hunched. I fumbled with the volume button on my phone, my thumb slipping twice on the smooth glass. His voice, when it finally crackled through the tiny speaker, was thick with emotion, choked with tears I hadn't seen him shed in my presence. He was talking to his mom. He must have stepped outside the hospice for some air, and for some reason he'd driven all the way home to do it. My heart ached for him. He sounded so broken. Leaning closer to my phone, I prepared myself to hear a final, gut-wrenching goodbye. But the words that tumbled out of his mouth weren't about his mother at all. They were about me. And they were about my sister. I don't know what to do, Mom, Tom sobbed into the phone, his voice a raw, ragged whisper that sliced through the silent night and into my childhood bedroom. He had stopped pacing and was now leaning against the porch railing, his head bowed. From my vantage point through the Ring camera's fisheye lens, he looked like a man being crushed by an invisible weight. I can't keep doing this. My breath caught in my throat. Doing what? I thought. Being married to me. The idea was a cold slap, shocking and absurd. We were fine. A little boring, maybe, but fine. Weren't we? His mother's voice was too faint to make out, a distant murmur on the other end of the line. I could only hear Tom's side of the confession, a one-man play that was methodically dismantling my entire world, line by devastating line. I promised him, Tom said, his voice cracking. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing. Now it just looked desperate. I was standing right there, holding his hand when he made me swear I'd look after her. Jenna's a good girl, Tom, he said. She's sensitive. You have to promise me you'll always look after her. He was talking about his dad. My father-in-law, Frank, had died from a sudden heart attack just 6 months before our wedding. He'd been a kind, jovial man who treated me like the daughter he'd never had. I adored him. And he, apparently, had pitied me. The phrase "look after her" echoed in my mind. It wasn't the request of a father entrusting his son with a partner, an equal. It was the plea of a man asking someone to take on a burden. A lifelong obligation. My heart started to pound in a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs, each beat a painful thud. The floral wallpaper of the room seemed to warp and swim before my eyes. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by worrying about my mother-in-law. But Tom's voice was relentlessly real. But that's all this is, Mom, he continued, the tears flowing freely now. It's a promise. It's a duty. 7 years, and every single day I feel like I'm playing a part. The dutiful husband. The kind provider. But I'm not happy. I haven't been happy since before we even got married. The words hit me like physical blows. Not happy. Playing a part. The quiet stability I had clung to, the comfortable predictability I had defined as contentment, it was all a performance. An act of charity. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the nightstand to steady myself. Buster, the old golden retriever, stirred at my feet, letting out a soft whine as if sensing my distress. I wanted to turn it off. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, shatter the screen, and pretend I'd never heard any of it. But I was frozen, my thumb hovering uselessly over the screen, compelled to witness the final, fatal blow. And then it came. It's Chloe, he whispered, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush, as if the darkness itself might betray him. It's always been her. The name hung in the air, electric and poisonous. Chloe. My sister. My bright, laughing whirlwind of a sister. My best friend. From the first time I met her, I knew. She's so full of life, Mom. She sees the world in color. When I'm with her, I feel like I can actually breathe. We just connect on a level I've never had with Jenna. He let out a dry, humorless laugh that sounded more like a choke. God, that's pathetic, isn't it? In love with my wife's sister. And Jenna has no idea. She thinks Chloe is her best friend, and Chloe is so loyal to her. She'd never. It could never happen. I'm trapped. I promised Dad, and I can't break that promise, especially not now, with you. His voice trailed off, consumed by a fresh wave of grief. But this time, I felt no sympathy. All I felt was a cold, spreading numbness. The dual betrayal was incomprehensible. My husband didn't love me, he loved my sister. And my entire marriage was a lie, a 7-year act of pity orchestrated by a dead man. The call ended. Tom wiped his face on his sleeve, straightened his shoulders, and walked out of the camera's frame. The motion alert stopped. The screen went dark, and I was left alone in the silent, floral wallpapered room with a truth so ugly it threatened to swallow me whole. The hours that followed were a blur of silent, suffocating shock. I didn't sleep. I just lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling as the first hints of dawn crept through the curtains, casting long, gray shadows across the room. The phone lay on the nightstand, feeling less like a communication device and more like a small, black bomb that had already detonated, leaving me at the epicenter of the blast. Every memory from the past 7 years, every quiet dinner, every shared smile, every I love you Tom had ever uttered, was now tainted, replaying in my mind as a scene from his one-man show. I was no longer a wife, I was an audience of one, and I had been fooled by the performance. His words about Chloe were a separate, sharper kind of pain. My sister, my confidante. She sees the world in color. The phrase twisted in my gut. Was it true? Did Tom see me only in shades of gray? I scrolled frantically through my memories of the three of us together. Holiday dinners, summer barbecues, birthday parties. Tom was always a little different around Chloe, I realized with a sickening jolt. More relaxed, quicker to laugh. His eyes would follow her as she moved around a room, a detail I had always interpreted as the friendly, watchful gaze of a brother-in-law. How could I have been so blind? I thought of all the times Chloe had been my shoulder to cry on, the times I'd confessed my quiet insecurities about my marriage. He loves you, Jen, she'd always say, fiercely loyal. He's just not a very expressive guy. You know that. Was her loyalty a performance, too? Or was she, as Tom had suggested, completely unaware, the innocent object of his secret affection? I didn't know which possibility was worse. Morning came, and with it, the dreadful obligation of pretending everything was normal. My phone buzzed around 8 a.m. It was a text from Tom. Mom passed away peacefully about an hour ago. I'm at the house with my brother. We'll call you later. There it was. The news I should have been dreading, the event that should have filled me with sorrow for him. Instead, I felt a cold, hollow detachment. His confession hadn't just been a confession, it had been his final conversation with his dying mother. He had used her last moments to unburden himself about his love for my sister and his resentment of me. The selfishness of it was staggering. I managed to type back, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Here for you if you need anything." The words felt like ash in my mouth. An hour later, another text. This time, from Chloe. Just heard about Tom's mom, poor guy. How's he holding up? How are you? Call me when you get a chance. Love you. My hands started to shake. I wanted to call her, to scream at her, to demand to know if she had any idea, if she had ever felt the same connection Tom had spoken of with such agonizing reverence. But what if she was innocent? Accusing her could shatter our relationship, and the thought of losing my sister on top of everything else was unbearable. I couldn't face her. Not yet. I texted back a lie colon hanging in there. Just really sad for Tom. Talk later, busy with Buster. For the rest of the day, I moved through my parents' house like a ghost, mechanically walking the dog, watering the plants, my mind a chaotic storm of grief and rage. The central conflict raged within me, confrontation or silence. If I confronted Tom, I would be blowing up our lives, our family, and the benevolent memory of his father whose dying wish had become my prison. It would mean facing my sister with an accusation that could destroy us. But the alternative, saying nothing, felt like a different kind of death. To live the rest of my life with this knowledge, to know that every touch, every word of affection from my husband was an act of resentful duty, the thought was suffocating. I would be a willing participant in my own humiliation. That evening, as I was spooning dog food into Buster's bowl, my phone rang. It was Tom. I stared at his name on the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. This was it. The performance had to begin. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I swiped to answer, composing my face into a mask of sympathy. "Hey," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm so sorry, Tom." There was a pause, and then his voice, thick with a grief I now knew was complicated by so much more. "Thanks, Jen. It's been a rough day." He told me about the arrangements, about his brother, about the logistics of death that seem so cruel in the face of loss. I listened, making the appropriate murmurs of support. Then he said the words that made the floor drop out from under me. "Listen, Chloe called me a little while ago to give her condolences. She offered to come over to our place tomorrow to help me start sorting through some of Mom's old photos for the funeral. She's such a good sister to you." The casualness of it, the sheer audacity. My sister, the object of his secret love, was going to our home, my home, to comfort him. The turning point had arrived, not as a choice I made, but as a crisis delivered to me. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't let them be alone together in our house, surrounded by the life that was my lie. I had to go there. I had to face them. "That's so thoughtful of her," I said, the words tasting like poison. "Actually, I think I'll come home tomorrow morning too. You shouldn't have to go through this alone." There was a fractional pause on Tom's end. Was it surprise? Disappointment? I couldn't tell. "Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be great, Jen. I'll see you then." He sounded tired, defeated. We hung up, and the mask I was wearing crumbled. A cold, hard resolve settled in its place. I wasn't going home to play the supportive wife. I was going home to reclaim the truth. The next morning, I drove home in a daze, the familiar 30-mile stretch of highway feeling like a journey to a foreign land. When I walked through the front door, the scene in the living room was exactly as I had pictured, and 1,000 times worse. Tom was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums, his face etched with grief. Chloe was sitting next to him, her hand resting gently on his back in a gesture of comfort. They weren't doing anything wrong, but the intimacy of the scene, viewed through the lens of what I now knew, was nauseating. They both looked up as I entered, their expressions mirroring each other's surprise. "Jenna, I thought you weren't coming back until this evening," Chloe said, getting up to hug me. I sidestepped her embrace. The hurt on her face was immediate and palpable, but I couldn't bring myself to care. "I changed my mind," I said, my voice flat. I looked directly at Tom. "We need to talk." The air in the room grew thick and heavy. Chloe looked back and forth between us, confused. "Is everything okay?" she asked tentatively. I kept my eyes locked on my husband. "Chloe, could you give us a minute, please?" It wasn't a request. It was a dismissal. She hesitated, then nodded slowly and retreated to the kitchen, leaving the sliding glass door to the backyard slightly ajar. Tom slowly got to his feet, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Jenna, what's wrong? You're acting strange." "Am I?" I let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of any humor. "I think my acting skills are nothing compared to yours, Tom. You deserve an award for your 7-year performance." His face paled. He knew. "What are you talking about?" he asked, but his voice lacked conviction. I held up my phone. "The Ring camera. It sends motion alerts, you know. Even when it's 2 in the morning. Even when a husband is standing on his own front porch, confessing to his dying mother that his entire marriage is a burdensome obligation he took on as a deathbed promise." Every ounce of color drained from his face. He looked like he'd been struck. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Don't bother denying it," I said, my voice starting to tremble with a rage I could no longer contain. "I heard everything." Every word about looking after sensitive Jenna. Every word about how you're not happy, how you're just playing a part. And every single word about Chloe. At the mention of her name, he flinched as if I'd physically hit him. From the kitchen, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Chloe had heard. Good. Jenna, I didn't mean for you to, Tom stammered, finally finding his voice. You weren't supposed to hear that. I was upset, I was grieving. Grieving? I shot back, stepping closer to him. You used your mother's last hours on this earth to whine about your marriage and fantasize about my sister. Don't you dare hide behind your grief. For once in our 7 years together, be honest with me. Is it true? Do you love her? He stared at me, his eyes filled with a miserable cocktail of guilt and despair. He couldn't even do me the courtesy of lying anymore. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The confirmation, though expected, still felt like a punch to the gut. It was real. All of it. The kitchen door slid open. Chloe stood there, her face as white as a sheet, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tom, is that true? She whispered, her voice trembling. What did you say? Tom wouldn't look at her. He just stared at the floor, a man utterly broken by his own revealed secrets. Chloe, he began, but he couldn't finish. And in that moment, looking at my sister's shocked and wounded face, I had my answer to the other, more painful question. She hadn't known. Her loyalty to me had been real. The realization didn't bring relief, only a deeper, more profound sadness. Tom's secret hadn't just destroyed my marriage, it had poisoned the most important relationship in my life. I looked at the two of them, my husband, who saw me as a duty, and my sister, who he saw as a dream. The quiet, stable life I thought I had was a fiction. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it had never existed at all. Get out, I said, my voice eerily calm. Both of you. Just get out of my house. Chloe started to protest, to explain, but I held up a hand. Not now, Chloe. Please, just go. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but she saw the finality in mine and turned, walking numbly out the front door. Tom remained, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Jenna, he started. I am so sorry. Sorry you got caught, I finished for him. Sorry you have to face the consequences. But you're not sorry for the lie. You were prepared to live it forever. And that was the most unforgivable part. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had sentenced me to a life where I was not a wife, but a burden he resented. He finally left. The front door clicked shut, and the silence that descended was different from the quiet I was used to. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I never truly had. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever forgive Tom, or if my relationship with my sister could ever be repaired. Everything was broken. But as I stood there, for the first time in 7 years, the silence didn't feel like contentment. It felt like the quiet before a storm, yes, but it also felt like the beginning of something else. It felt like the truth. And maybe, just maybe, the truth, however ugly, was a foundation I could actually build on. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.